The air in Leclerc, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, hung thick with the scent of truffles and entitlement. Try saying Chateau Margaux again without mangling it like some backwoods waitress, drawled Richard Kensington, his voice dripping with condescension. He exaggerated Aliyah's slight Haitian accent, drawing smirks from his Wall Street colleagues. The wine list trembled in her hands as laughter rippled through the VIP section. Honestly, they'll hire anyone these days, Richard added, adjusting his platinum Rolex. Maybe stick to serving plantains, darling. Across the table, Mr. Liang, a Taiwanese tech mogul, stiffened his chopsticks, hovering over his untouched foie gras. Without missing a beat, Aliyah turned to him and fluidly switched to flawless Mandarin. Sir, would you prefer a detailed history of this Bordeaux's terroir? The table fell dead silent. Richard's smirk withered as Mr. Liang's eyes lit up with recognition and something sharper respect. At 5:03 a.m., the blare of Aliyah's alarm shattered the quiet of her Brooklyn walk-up. She silenced it instantly, glancing at the thin wall separating her from Grand's room. At 29, Aliyah Carter wasn't supposed to be here, not with her Yale linguistics degree gathering dust next to a framed photo of her and Gran in Port-au-Prince. She moved through her tiny kitchen fingers, tracing Creole proverbs in her journal while the kettle screamed. 3 years ago, when Gran's MS diagnosis came, Aliyah had traded academic conferences for double shifts, her dreams of a PhD dissolving into the clatter of silverware. "Morning, chérie," Gran called from her wheelchair in the doorway, her voice still melodic despite the pain. Aliyah pressed a steaming mug of tisane into her gnarled hands. "VIP section again tonight," she said, avoiding Gran's probing gaze. "Better tips." She didn't mention the way Richard's friends had accidentally brushed against her hips all evening, or how the maitre d' always assigned her to tables with the loudest racists for the ambiance. Gran's knuckles tightened around the mug. "Remember what your father said before the storm took him." Aliyah exhaled, reciting the mantra, "A closed mouth won't feed empty bellies." But her fists clenched at the memory of Richard's sneer. That night, as she polished Riedel glasses in the empty dining room, Mr. Liang reappeared alone. He slid a business card across the bar. "My firm needs a cultural liaison," he said quietly. "Someone who understands subtleties." Behind them, Richard's laughter boomed from a private booth, his voice slurred with expensive scotch. Aliyah pocketed the card, her pulse roaring louder than the humiliation. Some treasures, she realized, weren't meant to stay buried. The pristine white tablecloths of Leclerc glowed under the chandeliers like untouched snow, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Aliyah's chest. She slipped through the staff entrance, exchanging a silent fist bump with Luis, the Guatemalan line cook who'd been scrubbing pans there since before she was born. The kitchen hummed with pre-service chaos, knives hacking through bone sous chefs screaming over sizzling foie gras, the head chef's voice slicing through it all like a cleaver. Table 12 through 15 Carter, Whitman Enterprises Chinese investors. Manager Reynolds didn't look up from his clipboard, his Ferragamo loafers tapping impatiently against the stainless steel floor. 8-figure accounts. Don't breathe wrong. Aliyah nodded, shoving her dog-eared copy of Negotiating Global Markets deeper into her locker. Reynolds' hand shot out, snagging her wrist. "And lose the textbook," he hissed. "This isn't community college." Across the kitchen, Tyler, a blonde server who still confused Pinot Grigio with Prosecco, was getting a pat on the back from the sommelier. "Thompson Party requested you specifically," Reynolds beamed. "They love your palate." Aliyah's nails bit into her palms. Last Thursday, she discreetly corrected Tyler's butchery of Gewürztraminer, only to have Reynolds pull her aside. "Let the professionals handle wine talk, sweetheart." Now the manager leaned in his cologne, reeking of privilege. "If the Whitman table asks about vintages, just fetch Tyler. And for God's sake, drop the Creole lilt, these people want refinement. As Reynolds strutted away, Aliyah adjusted the diamond-patterned folds of her napkins with military precision. She could recite every tasting note from Bordeaux to Napa in Mandarin and French. Not that it mattered. At Leclerc, Merritt was as malleable as the butter sculptures garnishing the VIP plates. In the break room's lone corner, Aliyah cracked open her book. Mandarin characters sprawled across the pages like soldiers' Guanxi connections, Xichang market Li profit words that should have been her weapons in corporate skyscrapers not whispered between refilling water glasses. Bu ke jieshu de Tiaoquan, she murmured, rehearsing how to reject unfair contract terms, her Beijing honed tones flawless. The door burst open. Tyler sauntered in with two other servers, their laughter dying when they saw her. "Look, it's the human Google Translate," he sneered, snatching her book. "What's this week's fantasy, pretending you're not just here to carry my trays?" His friends chuckled as he flipped through the pages, pausing at a sticky note, Liang Corp. Interview 2's, 10 a.m. Tyler's grin turned venomous. "Oh, someone thinks they're management material." He pocketed the note. "Let's see how your big break goes when Reynolds hears you're job hunting on his time." Aliyah's vision tunneled. That note was her lifeline, the one Mr. Liang had slipped her last night. As Tyler turned to leave, she lunged, knocking over a tray of silverware with a crash that brought the entire kitchen to a standstill. "Give it back." Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. For the first time, Tyler hesitated. Behind them, Luis stopped scrubbing, his wet hands dripping onto the floor. The head chef's knife hovered mid-chop. Even the walk-in's hum seemed to pause. Then Reynolds' voice cut through the silence. "Carter, my office now." Aliyah didn't move. The air tasted like burnt caramel and decades of swallowed words. Somewhere a clock ticked, counting down to revolution. Aliyah's fingers flew across the polished tea set as she arranged the delicate jasmine leaves, the same blend she'd served Gran every morning for 3 years. Through the service doors, she could hear Richard Kensington's booming voice already dominating the room. "Han, you look positively Confucian in this lighting." He guffawed, slapping Mr. Liang's back with a force that made the older man stiffen. Peterson materialized beside her, sweating through his Armani collar. "The Longjing tea," he whispered frantically. "They're asking about oxidation levels, and I pan-fired within 24 hours of picking. Aliyah cut in quietly, adjusting the tray. "No more than 2% moisture content. Would you like me to explain the Qingming harvest tradition to Mr. Liang?" Peterson's eyes darted toward the table where Kensington was now loudly mispronouncing dim sum. "Just make it quick." As she entered the dining room, Kensington's gaze locked onto her like a predator spotting prey. "Ah, the help arrives." He turned to Mr. Liang with a smirk. "Careful, these girls will upsell you on anything." Aliyah kept her spine straight as she began the ceremonial pour, her movements precise as a ballet. The steam curled upward as Mr. Liang studied her, not her uniform, but her. When she recited the tea's provenance in flawless Mandarin, his associate nearly dropped his phone. Kensington's smile faltered. "Since when does Leclerc hire tour guides?" A dangerous quiet settled over the table. Mr. Liang lifted his cup, inhaling the aroma with closed eyes. "This is prepared correctly," he said in English deliberate. "A rare skill." His gaze flicked to Aliyah's name tag. "Ms. Carter, you studied in Hangzhou." Before she could answer, Kensington slammed his whiskey down. "Christ, Han, it's tea, not a dissertation." He snapped his fingers at Aliyah. "Sweetheart, the adults are trying to discuss business. Unless you've got an MBA from your side hustle." The room froze. Even Peterson paled. Then Mr. Liang set his cup down with a click. "Actually," he said, sliding a business card across the tablecloth toward Aliyah, "my CFO position requires trilingual expertise. Starting salary $280,000. He eyed Kensington. "You were saying about side hustles." Kensington's neck turned splotchy red. You can't be serious. Deadly. Mr. Liang stood buttoning his jacket. We'll continue negotiations after Ms. Carter joins us, tomorrow, 10 a.m. As the billionaire strode out, his entire team following Aliyah realized the card wasn't white, but the pale gold of Liang Corp's executive tier. Across the room, Tyler's mouth hung open. Peterson looked ready to faint, and Kensington. He stared at Aliyah like she'd grown fangs. She allowed herself one small, sharp smile before turning toward the kitchen. Some performances, it seemed, had encore potential. The kitchen doors swung shut behind Aliyah with a sound like a guillotine dropping. Around her, the staff moved in hushed silence. They'd all heard Kensington's performance through the service window. Louise pressed a chilled towel into her shaking hands without a word. The ice-cold fabric bit into her palms as she gripped it, the anger coiling tighter in her chest with each breath. Through the porthole window, she watched Kensington holding court, his diamond cufflinks catching the light as he gestured wildly. And that's why we need American oversight on your AI project, he was saying, jabbing his steak knife toward Mr. Liang's untouched plate. No offense, Jin, but your engineers need someone to simplify things for them. Aliyah's vision tunneled. She reached for the Macallan 25, then stopped. Her fingers hovered over the bottle's neck before sliding past it to grasp something else entirely. When she re-entered the dining room, Kensington was mid-sentence. Can't expect these people to understand quantum computing when they can't even... He broke off as Aliyah set down not his whiskey but the jasmine tea service Mr. Liang had originally requested. The delicate porcelain clinked against the tablecloth like a challenge. Kensington's face darkened. I said Scotch, sweetheart. Or is that too many syllables for you? Aliyah didn't flinch. She turned to Mr. Liang and spoke in crystal-clear Mandarin. The tea is from Hangzhou's Imperial Gardens, picked before the rains last April. She poured the golden liquid into his cup with ceremonial precision. Like your mother preferred Liangxian Sheng. A beat of silence. Then, you knew my mother. Mr. Liang's usually inscrutable face flickered with something raw. Aliyah met his gaze. I translated her keynote at the 2016 AI Ethics Summit. She argued that true intelligence requires cultural fluency. Her eyes cut to Kensington, who was gaping like a fish. In 3 languages, the table erupted. Kensington's face purpled. What the hell is this? Mr. Liang raised a hand, silencing him. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a gavel. Our contract stipulated bilingual project managers. He nodded to Aliyah. You just found mine. Peterson materialized, sputtering. Mr. Liang, surely you don't mean... I do. Mr. Liang stood buttoning his suit jacket. We'll reconvene at Liang Corp tomorrow, 10 a.m. sharp. He paused beside Aliyah, lowering his voice. Wear the pin your grandmother gave you, the jade one. As the delegation filed out, Kensington remained frozen, his $2,000 tie suddenly too tight. Behind him, Tyler dropped a tray with a spectacular crash. Aliyah didn't look back as she untied her apron. The silk of her future and the sound of glass shattering felt infinitely lighter. The polished silver tray in Aliyah's hands became a mirror reflecting back the years of swallowed words and forced smiles. As she adjusted the ceviche garnishes, she caught snippets of Kensington's confidential negotiation phrases like intellectual property reassignment and exclusive North American rights, delivered with the slick confidence of a man used to exploiting loopholes. One of Liang's associates tapped his tablet screen sharply. Zhe xiang tiaoquan wei sheme gaile, he demanded, pointing to a clause. Kensington waved a dismissive hand. Standard language, my friend. Just protects our investment if your team can't deliver the promised. Aliyah's body moved before her mind could stop it. The water pitcher clinked against a glass as she accidentally refilled Mr. Liang's cup. Ta zai ho mian jiale yige zidiao quan, she murmured in perfect Mandarin, barely moving her lips. Rugo nimen bu neng zai liu ge yue nai jiao fu cheng shu suoyu jishi changquan gui tamen gong su suoyu. The table froze. Kensington's fork hovered mid-air. What did she just... Mr. Liang set down his napkin with deliberate calm. Ms. Carter was explaining your minor adjustments. His voice could have cut glass. Specifically, the clause granting Whitman Enterprises full ownership of our patents if we miss development deadlines by 6 months. A vein pulsed in Kensington's temple. Now listen here. No. Mr. Liang stood his chair, scraping loud enough to turn heads across the dining room. You listen. We came here in good faith. You brought us a Trojan horse contract and a server more qualified than your entire legal team. He nodded to Aliyah, then dropped his napkin onto his untouched halibut. We're done. As the Liang delegation stormed out, Kensington lunged toward Aliyah. You bitch, he hissed. You think you're clever? I'll make sure you never work in this city again. The restaurant had gone dead silent. Every patron, every staff member stared. Aliyah felt the weight of it, the fear, the years of keeping her head down, then something unexpected lightness. She untied her apron slowly, letting it drop to the floor with finality. Funny, she said loud enough for the room to hear. That's exactly what your wife said when I translated her text to the tennis instructor last month. Gasps rippled through the dining room. Kensington turned purple. You're finished. Aliyah was already walking toward the exit when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, Liang Corp lobby. 8 a.m. Bring your Mandarin dictionaries. Behind her, the kitchen doors burst open. Luis and 3 other line cooks stepped out, blocking Kensington's path as he tried to follow her. Sorry, sir, Luis said, arms crossed over his stained whites. Staff only. The last thing Aliyah heard as the doors swung shut was the sound of breaking china and the beautiful, deafening silence of chains snapping. The Bordeaux swirled violently in Aliyah's decanter as her grip tightened. Through the kitchen's swinging doors, she could see Kensington laughing with his associates, his smug grin stretching wider with each sip of wine. Meanwhile, Mr. Liang's team huddled over the contract, their frustrated whispers barely audible over the clatter of fine china. A sudden crash made her jump. Luis had accidentally dropped a stack of plates near the service station. Oops, he muttered, kneeling to clean up the shards while deliberately blocking Peterson's view. You got about 30 seconds, Hermana. Aliyah's pulse roared in her ears as she reached for a dessert plate. With steady hands, she wrote 3 Mandarin characters in chocolate sauce along the rim. D15 ye page 15. Beneath it, she added Du, Li Zhengji Ku Independent Economic Zone. The moment the server delivered the plate to Mr. Liang's table, everything happened at once. Kensington's smile vanished as Mr. Liang flipped directly to the specified page. The Chinese executive's eyes narrowed at the buried clause, one granting Whitman Enterprises exclusive rights to license their AI technology across North America and Europe, effectively locking Han innovations out of Western markets. Mr. Liang demanded, slamming the contract on the table. His finger stabbed at the offending paragraph. This was never discussed. Kensington's lawyer leaned forward. As we said, standard territorial protections. Standard. Mr. Liang's usually calm voice turned razor sharp. He turned the plate toward them, the chocolate message now melting into ominous streaks. Does your standard include having your waitstaff warn us about traps? Every eye turned to Aliyah, who was suddenly very busy polishing wine glasses. Kensington shot up so fast his chair toppled over. You, he pointed a shaking finger at her. You're done in this industry, Enough. Mr. Liang's quiet command silenced the room. He stood adjusting his cuffs with lethal calm. We will be reviewing all contracts with our Beijing legal team. As for you, Ms. He paused, reading her name tag. Carter. My car will be waiting at 7:30 a.m. Bring your passport. Peterson rushed forward. Mr. Liang, surely you don't... I want an ethical trilingual AI specialist who understands both contract law and cultural nuance. Mr. Liang arched an eyebrow. No, I insist. As the Liang delegation strode out, Kensington lunged toward Aliyah only to be intercepted by Luis and two massive sous chefs. Kitchen's closed, Jefe, Luis growled, cleaver glinting under the lights. Aliyah didn't wait to see the rest. She walked straight to the locker room, pulled out her dog-eared copy of international business law, and tucked it under her arm. The back exit alarm would sound when opened, but she didn't care anymore. Let them hear it. Let them all hear everything. Outside, the summer air smelled like jasmine and justice. Somewhere in Brooklyn, Gran would be watching the evening news right as the stock ticker showed Whitman Enterprises shares beginning their spectacular plunge. The Bordeaux's rich aroma filled the sudden silence as Aliyah stood her ground. Every syllable of her Beijing-accented Mandarin rang clear as crystal in the stunned dining room. Section 5.7 grants Whitman Enterprises first refusal rights on all future Han Innovations patents. She continued, locking eyes with Mr. Liang. Including developments unrelated to this partnership. Kensington's chair screeched as he vaulted up. What the hell is this? His cufflink caught the light as he stabbed a finger at her. Peterson, control your... Mr. Liang raised a single palm without looking away from Aliyah. Xiexie ni de zhonggao, he said quietly. Thank you for the warning. Then to Kensington in lethally calm English. We will be postponing signatures indefinitely. Chaos erupted. Kensington's fist came down on the table, sending wine glasses trembling. You'd take the word of some waitress over a Yale-educated linguist. Mr. Liang produced a smartphone displaying Aliyah's LinkedIn profile, last updated 3 years ago when she'd left Beijing. I remember Ms. Carter from the 2016 Tech Summit. Her simultaneous translation of my mother's keynote was unforgettable. A server dropped a tray. Silverware clattered. Peterson materialized, face purple. Ms. Wilson, it's Carter. Aliyah corrected, finally removing her name tag. The cheap plastic snapped between her fingers with satisfying finality. Mr. Liang stood buttoning his suit jacket. My car arrives in 10 minutes. He nodded to Aliyah. You'll ride with us. As the Liang delegation gathered their things, Kensington made one last grab for the contract, only to freeze. When Luis and 3 line cooks materialized behind Aliyah, their aprons splattered with the night's sauces like war paint. The last thing Aliyah heard as she walked out was Kensington screaming at Peterson, "Sue her, I want her destroyed," and Peterson's defeated reply, "For what, Richard? Speaking too well." Outside, the limousine door closed with a sound like destiny clicking into place. Mr. Liang handed her a document, an employment contract with Liang Corp's gold seal gleaming at the bottom. He's starting tomorrow, he said. You negotiate our terms. As the car pulled away from the curb, Aliyah watched Leclerc's neon sign shrink in the rearview mirror. Somewhere inside, a broken system kept turning. Somewhere ahead, a new world waited. And for the first time in years, the weight on her shoulders didn't drag her down. It anchored her. The silence that followed Mr. Liang's invitation was so absolute, Aliyah could hear the ice melting in Kensington's abandoned scotch. Every server had stopped mid-step, every diner had paused mid-bite, even the string quartet in the corner missed a note. Aliyah's fingers tightened around the wine bottle, the glass suddenly slippery with condensation. Years of being invisible warred with the electric thrill of finally being seen, then a quiet thud from the kitchen doors. Luis stood framed in the doorway, his arms crossed over his sauce-splattered whites. Behind him, the entire kitchen staff had gathered, their silent solidarity more powerful than any cheer. "Xiexie nin de Yao King," Aliyah said smoothly, setting the Bordeaux down with deliberate care. "Thank you for your invitation. But I believe I'll need the proper seat for this discussion." Kensington's chair legs shrieked against the marble as he stood. "This is insane, Peterson." The manager, pale as the tablecloth, surprised everyone by stepping back. "Ms. Carter is technically still on staff," he mumbled. Mr. Liang didn't smile. He simply snapped his fingers at a passing waiter. "Another place setting. And a clean glass for our new consultant. As the china clinked into place, Aliyah shrugged off her server's jacket, revealing the crisp white blouse she always wore beneath it, a silent rebellion against the uniform's constraints. The Yale pin Gran had given her gleamed at the collar. Kensington's lawyer leaned forward. "Mr. Liang, surely you understand how irregular—" "What's irregular?" Mr. Liang interrupted, pouring Aliyah a glass of the $800 Bordeaux himself. "Is expecting me to sign a contract that would hand over 15 years of my company's R&D. He pushed the document toward Aliyah. "Would you—" The pages whispered as she turned them, her trained eye catching every loophole, every buried landmine. When she finally looked up, it wasn't at Kensington, but at his young associate whose fingers trembled around his pen. "Section 4.3, she said gently. "The non-compete clause would prevent you from working in AI for 5 years if you leave Whitman, even as a junior analyst." The associate's pen clattered to the table. Kensington's fist came down. "That's proprietary." "FIFA de Mr. Liang corrected coldly. "Illegal." He stood buttoning his suit jacket with finality. "We'll be taking Ms. Carter's notes to our legal team. Perhaps we'll reconsider when you bring an honest proposal." As the Liang delegation rose, Kensington made one last desperate play. "Jin, be reasonable. You're throwing away billions over integrity." Aliyah arched a brow, slipping effortlessly into the boardroom cadence she'd practiced for years. "That's not a liability, Mr. Kensington. That's what makes partnerships last." The restaurant erupted in applause, not from the wealthy patrons, but from the dishwashers, line cooks, and servers who'd lined the walls. Luis whistled through his fingers, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife. Outside, the Liang Corp limousine idled at the curb. As Aliyah gathered her things, she caught her reflection in a champagne flute, no longer a shadow, but a woman sharp enough to cut glass. The back door alarm wailed when she pushed it open, but no one came running. Some rebellions, it seemed, were meant to be heard. The private hallway's dim lighting cast Kensington's face in sharp relief, his designer stubble suddenly looking less polished and more unhinged. Aliyah could smell the desperation beneath his Tom Ford cologne, the sour tang of a man who'd just seen his carefully laid plans unravel. "Let me explain something you clearly don't understand," he hissed, crowding her against the wall. "People like you don't get to. People like me." Aliyah arched a brow, her voice dropping to a whisper sharp enough to draw blood. "Yale linguistics summa cum laude, or the woman who just cost you a 9-figure deal." Kensington's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "Richard." The single word cracked through the air like a whip. Mr. Liang stood at the hallway's entrance, his smartphone raised. The camera flash illuminated Kensington's grip on Aliyah's arm in stark detail. "Funny," Mr. Liang mused, scrolling through the photos. "These look remarkably like assault, especially when sent to Wall Street Journal reporters who've been asking about your questionable negotiation tactics." Kensington recoiled as if burned. "This is blackmail." "No," Aliyah corrected, straightening her blouse. "This is leverage." She tapped her Yale pin meaningfully. "You should have Googled alumni networks before manhandling one." Back in the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. The waitstaff moved with newfound confidence, their posture straighter as they served the remaining courses. At table 14, Kensington's associates avoided eye contact while Mr. Liang's team pored over the revised contract with Aliyah's notes in the margins. When dessert arrived, a chocolate torte with integrity written in gold leaf courtesy of the suddenly rebellious pastry chef, Mr. Liang slid a business card across the table. "We leave for Shanghai Monday. Your grandmother's medical team will join us." Kensington's choked protest was drowned out by the sound of Luis dropping an entire tray of champagne flutes behind him. The shattering glass sounded suspiciously like a standing ovation. As Aliyah gathered her things, she noticed Peterson hovering nervously by the kitchen doors. "About your last paycheck. I keep it," she said, nodding toward the kitchen where the staff had begun an impromptu celebration. "Buy them proper non-slip shoes. and maybe a union rep. The night air outside tasted like justice and jasmine tea. Somewhere in Brooklyn, Gran would be waiting. Somewhere in Shanghai, a new chapter beckoned. And right here, right now, for the first time in years, Aliyah Carter stood exactly where she belonged. The tension at the table crackled like static before a storm. Aliyah watched as Mr. Liang's fingers drummed a slow, deliberate rhythm on the contract, each tap echoing like a judge's gavel. "He let me propose an alternative," Mr. Liang said, sliding his tablet across the table. The screen displayed a live stock ticker. Whitman Enterprises shares had begun plummeting the moment photos of Kensington's hallway confrontation hit financial blogs. Kensington's lawyer choked on his mineral water. Those are doctored," Genshi de Aliyah murmured. "Authentic." She angled the screen to show trending hashtags. Whitman ethics fail, translator-gate. Mr. Liang steepled his fingers. "My revised terms, full IP protection, no territorial restrictions, and—" He nodded to Aliyah. "A 2% equity stake for our new director of global communications." The silence that followed was broken by the distinct snap of Kensington's Mont Blanc pen breaking in his grip. Director Kensington spat, "She's a waitress, and you're a man who just lost 18% of his net worth in 20 minutes. Mr. Liang observed mildly. "Shall we discuss what happens at 30%? Across the restaurant, every smartphone began pinging simultaneously. Reuters alert: Liang Corp announces competing partnership with Silicon Valley's Apex Technologies. Aliyah allowed herself one small, satisfied smile as Kensington's face drained of color. The game had changed, and for the first time she wasn't just a player, she held the cards. Mr. Liang rose, buttoning his jacket. "We'll expect your final decision by 9 a.m. Ms. Carter." He gestured toward the exit. "Your grandmother's flight to Shanghai leaves at noon. First class, of course." As they walked past the kitchen, the entire staff lined up in silent salute. Luis pressed a takeout container into Aliyah's hands inside the restaurant's famous chocolate torte, with one addition, "Fight the Power," scrawled in raspberry coulis across the box. The night air smelled like rain and revolution. Somewhere an empire was crumbling. Somewhere else, a new world was waiting. And Aliyah Carter. She was done being invisible. The crystal wine glasses caught the light as Aliyah poured a fresh round, the ruby liquid mirroring the slow thaw in the room's atmosphere. Around the table, postures relaxed by degrees. Mr. Liang's CFO stopped massaging his temples. Kensington's lawyer finally unclenched his jaw. "Mutual benefit," Mr. Liang was saying, his finger tracing a slow circle on the blank notepad. "Not a zero-sum game." Kensington surprised everyone by reaching into his breast pocket, not for a contract, but for a faded photograph. "My first deal in Shanghai," he said, sliding it across the table. The image showed a younger Kensington and an elderly Chinese man toasting with teacups. "Old Mr. Wen taught me that real partnerships outlast any contract." He hesitated, then added, "I've strayed from that." Aliyah's translation carried not just words, but the unspoken weight behind them. Mr. Liang studied the photo, then did something unexpected. He laughed. "Wen Liking. He banned you from his tea house in 2012 for trying to patent jasmine blending techniques." A shocked chuckle escaped Kensington. "You knew him." "His granddaughter runs our R&D department," Mr. Liang said dryly, signaling for more tea. As Aliyah prepared the leaves, measuring the precise temperature she'd learned during her Beijing years, she noticed the room's energy shifting. The junior associates began exchanging contact info. The lawyers debated clauses without venom. Even Peterson crept back from his managerial purgatory to quietly refill waters. When the new terms were drafted hours later, fair licensing joint oversight committees, and to everyone's surprise, a cultural exchange program for engineers, Kensington reached across the table to shake Mr. Liang's hand. Then he paused, turning to Aliyah. "You'll want to review this first," he said, pushing the document her way. Not to a lawyer, not to a CEO, to the woman who'd rebuilt the burned bridge between them. Outside dawn painted the sky in streaks of gold and violet. The restaurant staff had long since set up for breakfast, but no one rushed them. Somewhere in the chaos, Louise had produced a tray of fresh pastries and a single Yale mug for Aliyah's tea. As she sipped, Mr. Liang slid an envelope across the table. Not a contract, a plane ticket, first class, open return. For whenever you're ready, he said. The bridge doesn't disappear just because you've crossed it. Aliyah tucked it into her bag beside Grand's medication list and her dog-eared linguistics journal. The weight felt different now. Not an anchor, not a shackle, just possibility. The morning light caught the edges of the ivory room, gilding what had once seemed cold into something almost warm. Almost like home. The clink of silverware against porcelain filled the brief silence as Aliyah set down her water glass. Around the table, even the junior associates leaned forward. This was the unspoken question that had hovered over the evening. My grandmother raised me on two things. She began, fingers tracing the Yale pin at her collar. Sweet tea and Sun Tzu. When she got sick 3 years ago, her voice caught just once. Beijing doesn't have Southern Medicaid, and MS treatments cost more than PhD programs. Mr. Liang's CFO abruptly straightened his tie, blinking rapidly. Kensington's lawyer looked down at his untouched creme brulee. But apparently, Aliyah continued, her lips quirking as she gestured to the revised contract. They cost less than 18% of Whitman Enterprises' market cap. The table erupted in laughter. Even Kensington gave a grudging chuckle. It was Mr. Liang who sobered first, tapping the document thoughtfully. Your grandmother must be furious I'm still up past dawn. Aliyah finished checking her watch. But thrilled I finally used that $200,000 education. As dessert plates were cleared, an unexpected sound came from the kitchen doors, Luis and the dish crew banging pots in a makeshift ovation. Peterson, to everyone's shock, joined in the applause. Kensington stood suddenly buttoning his suit jacket. Monday, 9 a.m., my office. He slid a card across the table, not his usual platinum business card, but a handwritten note with an address. Bring your grandmother. My wife's foundation runs the best MS clinic on the East Coast. For the first time all night, Aliyah was speechless. Mr. Liang raised his teacup in a quiet toast. To unexpected bridges. As dawn painted the restaurant in gold, the ivory room no longer felt cold. Somewhere between the legal jargon and the laughter, between betrayal and understanding, the walls had finally dissolved. Aliyah tucked Kensington's note beside Mr. Liang's plane ticket, one to heal the past, the other to build the future. Outside, the city stirred to life, unaware that the world had quietly shifted its axis overnight. And in Brooklyn, an old woman waited by the window, her jade pin gleaming in the morning light, knowing without being told that her granddaughter was finally coming home, not as the girl who'd left, but as the woman she'd always meant to be. The words exceptional service hung in the air like the lingering scent of espresso, simple, professional, yet carrying the weight of a door being kicked open after years of knocking. Aliyah accepted Mr. Liang's handshake, her chef-roughened fingers meeting his manicured ones. The honor was mine, she said, then added in perfect Shanghainese dialect, Jiexie Ningye wo zhege jihui. Thank you for this opportunity. Kensington's head snapped up at the unfamiliar inflection. What was that? She Shanghainese, Mr. Liang said, eyebrows raised. My mother's dialect. He studied Aliyah with renewed interest. You've been holding out on us. A ghost of her grandmother's smirk touched Aliyah's lips. Every good negotiator keeps one card up their sleeve. As the group moved toward the exit, the restaurant staff formed an impromptu honor guard, Luis at the front holding a to-go bag that smelled suspiciously of truffles and victory. Peterson hovered near the door, wringing his hands. About your notice period. Consider this my 2 seconds notice. Aliyah said, handing him her server's notepad. Inside, instead of drink orders, were meticulous notes on every wine pairing error the sommelier had made that month. The night air hit her face like a baptism. Across the street, a black town car idled Mr. Liang's with a second vehicle pulling up behind it. Kensington surprised everyone by opening the door himself. "We'll send a car for you at 8:15, he said, then hesitated. "And bring your grandmother's medical records." In that moment, Aliyah saw the man he might have been before boardrooms and billion-dollar deals sanded away his edges. She nodded once, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. As the cars pulled away, her phone buzzed. A text from Luis left you something in the alley. "Don't let security see." Behind the dumpster, she found her advanced business Mandarin textbook and the restaurant's entire stash of imported Wagyu beef in a cooler. The first rays of dawn gilded the skyscrapers as Aliyah Carter walked away from Leclerc for the last time. In her pocket, 2 business cards and a plane ticket. In her hands, the tools of her past. And ahead, visible now in the clear morning light, the future she'd studied for, served for, and finally fought for. Somewhere in Brooklyn, an old woman's jade pin caught the sunrise through an apartment window. Somewhere in Shanghai, a corner office waited. And right here, right now, after years of being everyone's background music, Aliyah Carter was finally singing her own damn song. The conference room's glass walls seemed to magnify the silence as Kensington's apology hung in the air. Aliyah could see her own reflection superimposed over the skyline, the navy suit, the straightened posture, the woman who no longer looked out of place in a boardroom. Mr. Liang broke the quiet first. "A rare sight," he mused. Richard Kensington admitting he was wrong. Kensington's jaw worked, but he held his ground. "Credit where it's due. Ms. Carter didn't just save this deal, she exposed flaws in how we operate." He pushed a second folder toward her, this one emblazoned with the Whitman Enterprises logo. "Director of Global Strategy, full autonomy to revamp our international negotiation protocols and—" He hesitated, then added gruffly, "Your grandmother's treatment covered at our corporate facility." Aliyah's fingers didn't tremble as she opened the offer. The salary made her PhD stipend look like pocket change, but it was the last line that caught her breath. "Includes research sabbatical for completion of doctoral studies." Mr. Liang chuckled. "Now this is an American negotiation tactic I appreciate." He turned to Aliyah. "Of course our offer stands, but I'll add something new, a seat on our International Advisory Board, and quarterly trips to Beijing first class for 2. The unspoken for your grandmother hung between them. For the first time in years, Aliyah let herself imagine it. The campus libraries of her dreams. The thesis defense she'd postponed, the jade pin gleaming under boardroom lights instead of kitchen fluorescence. She closed both folders carefully. "Gentlemen," she said, savoring the word, "I believe this calls for a third option." From her briefcase, a thrift store fine buffed to a high shine. She produced a single sheet of paper, a proposal for Carter Consulting Group, independent, bilingual, specializing in bridging the gap between East and West. Kensington barked a laugh. "You're playing us against each other." "No," Aliyah corrected gently. "I'm offering what neither of you can provide alone, true neutrality." She tapped the paper. 6-month contracts for both companies. After that, we renegotiate. The 2 CEOs exchanged glances, competitive, calculating, then reluctantly impressed. Mr. Liang signed first, his pen flashing in the sunlight. "Welcome to the big leagues, Ms. Carter." Kensington added his signature with a flourish. "Just don't charge us the asshole tax." As the elevator descended 40 floors, Aliyah's phone buzzed a photo from Luis. The entire kitchen staff crowded around a laptop watching the live Business Channel headline, "Former Waitress Broker's Historic Liang Whitman Deal." The subway ride home felt different this time. No uniform to change out of, no shifts to rush toward. Just a woman in a sharp navy suit, her grandmother's jade pin catching the light and the delicious weight of 2 signed contracts in her bag. Somewhere over the Atlantic, a plane might one day carry her back to Beijing. But today the Brooklyn-bound train carried her toward a different homecoming, to an apartment where an old woman waited, where a faded Yale acceptance letter still hung on the fridge, and where the future at long last tasted as sweet as the victory pastries Louise had smuggled into her bag. The jade plant on Aliyah's new desk caught the fading sunlight, its leaves the exact shade of Grand's prized pin. Outside her office window, Manhattan glittered, the same skyline she'd once seen only through restaurant windows while clearing plates. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Louise stood in the doorway holding two things that didn't belong together, a bottle of Dom Perignon and a grease-stained takeout bag. "Thought you might miss the authentic Leclerc experience," he said, plopping the bag on her mahogany desk. Inside were 3 perfect crab cakes, the VIP appetizer she'd served 100 times but never tasted. "You quit?" Aliyah asked, eyeing his crisp button-down. "I are promoted," Louise corrected, popping the champagne with a practiced twist. "Head sommelier, thanks to someone's anonymous tip about the old one's fake credentials." He poured 2 glasses, nodding to the photo on her desk. Grand beaming in her new apartment, the MS Clinic's brochure prominently displayed on her coffee table. As they clinked glasses, Aliyah's phone lit up with simultaneous alerts, Kensington requesting her consult on the Tokyo deal, Mr. Liang sharing a draft of their Beijing expansion plan. "Hey, look at you," Louise teased. "Too important for us little people now." Aliyah snorted, tossing him a folder labeled Carter Consulting Group, employee offered, a 1. "Turns out I need a trilingual operations manager who knows the difference between Gewürztraminer and gasoline." Luis's laughter cut off abruptly when he saw the salary. "Conyo, does this mean I have to wear a tie?" Outside, the city lights winked on one by one in office towers, in apartments, in the kitchen of a certain 5-star restaurant where a new waitress was just learning the wine list. Somewhere another Aliyah was biding her time. Somewhere another Louise was watching. But here now, in this office, with its jade plant and crab cake crumbs, the world felt improbably perfectly balanced. The past hadn't disappeared, the student debt, the missed opportunities, the slights swallowed, but it no longer defined her. As Louise stole the last bite of crab cake, Aliyah spun her chair toward the window. The reflection showed a woman who'd walked through fire and emerged not just unburned but forged. Some treasures, it turned out, couldn't be stolen. Some bridges couldn't be burned. And some stories, like the one just beginning outside her office door, were meant to be shared. The jade plant on Aliyah's desk had grown 3 new leaves since she'd started at Carter Consulting, 1 for each of the overlooked hires she'd brought into the fold. The Columbia grad driving Ubers, the single mom coding in library basements, the veteran who'd been told his Mandarin wasn't business grade. As she crossed the lobby toward her mentoring session, the elevator doors opened to reveal a familiar face. Kensington stood frozen for half a second, then held the door with uncharacteristic patience. "Carter?" He nodded, eyeing the stack of resumes in her arms, all from applicants who listed food service under previous experience. "Richard," she smiled, stepping in. The elevator smelled like his $400 cologne and the faintest hint of the Ivory Room's truffle fries. He cleared his throat. "My daughter starts at Yale next fall. Wants to study in whatever it is you studied." The admission seemed to pain him. "Think your team could show her the best dumplings in Beijing," Aliyah finished. "We've got a whole cultural immersion program." She handed him a card, not her business one, but the handwritten address of a tiny Queen's tea shop. "Start here. The owner's grandmother taught me Shanghainese." The cafe buzzed with energy when she arrived. Her 3 mentees sat rapt as Louise, now Carter Consulting's director of operations, demonstrated how to open a $2,000 bottle of wine without spilling a drop. Essential corporate skill, he deadpanned, pouring samples into paper cups. Across the room, Gran held court with the security team, her wheelchair positioned like a throne. "My Aliyah," she announced to anyone listening, "used to recite Sun Tzu while folding napkins." The jade pin at her collar caught the light as she laughed. Later, as Aliyah walked a nervous young server through salary negotiations, his hands still smelled of dish soap from his lunch shift. She caught a glimpse of herself in the window. Not the girl who'd once trembled at a billionaire's sneer, but the woman who'd rewritten the rules of the game. Some stories ended with triumph. This one didn't end at all. It rippled outward in every resume pulled from the discard pile, every overlooked talent given a microphone, every executive who'd learned to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. And if sometimes late at night Aliyah still dreamed of crystal glasses trembling on silver trays, well, even bridges needed pillars to stand on. The world was full of invisible people. But visibility, like everything worth having, was contagious. The jade plant on Aliyah's desk had grown 3 new leaves, one for each mentee who'd gotten promoted that quarter. Outside her window, the city pulsed with countless untold stories. The barista drafting a business plan between lattes. The security guard writing poetry on his breaks. The janitor who could troubleshoot any software glitch. At Carter Consulting, they had a saying now: talent has no uniform. Luis had it printed on mugs. As the sunset painted the skyline gold, Aliyah scrolled through their latest initiative, See the Potential, a platform where Fortune 500 companies posted hidden talent success stories alongside their job listings. The top video showed Kensington's daughter giving a campus tour in flawless Mandarin. Some revolutions didn't need shouting. Some just needed someone to hold the door open a little longer, to really see the person carrying the tray. The world was full of Aliyahs. The real power lay in recognizing them.